StrayAllDay.com.
To the show, you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. Dre, what is that? That's the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of wait for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques, all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is the hidden opportunities in business. Now, before we get into this, let me tell everybody, I send out a text message every morning free of charge that is guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day. I call it the daily motivation, and it does do everything that I said that it does. You want to get this message, I already know you want to get this message, so here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Text me at my number, which is 305-384-6894, and every morning when the daily motivation text goes out, because you are a member of my text community, you'll be getting this message straight to your phone, free of charge. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. All right, any of you is interested in making more money in your business, you're interested in turning your side hustle into a full-time hustle. If you need to get your personal life on point with your business life, or your business life on point with your personal life, or you need to get both of them on point because neither one of them is looking good right now, trust me, I can help you with all of those things. But you had to be a member of the university to get access to me, access to our frameworks, and access to the coaching that will take you where you need to go. And keep in mind that you are on the clock, folks. You do not have forever in your life to actually do something and make the most of your potential. You ready to squeeze all the juice out of that orange that is you? You need to come to Work on Your Game University. So go to WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com and let's get started. Again, WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. Now that we got all that out of the way, now let's get into it. We're talking the hidden opportunities in business. So what I'm going to share here today are ways that you can find loopholes and opportunities to make things happen for yourself in business that are not the traditional paths of making things happen. In other words, I'm going to show you how to make things happen in ways that go outside of the normal process. All right, ways that you can kind of go outside of the norm. Let's just leave it at that. I don't even need to say anything else, as we're going to get into this topic and you'll understand a whole lot better as we get into it. So you want to look for the loopholes, opportunities, things that are non-traditional, off the beaten path. This will require some creativity of thinking, and frankly, it's going to require you having some balls. All right, and I've talked about this. I talked about having balls in episode number, let me see what episode that was, where I talked about having some balls. Episode 2256, Key Entrepreneurial Asset is balls, and also episode 1796 where I said get some balls. So if you ain't got any balls, then you may need to grow some in order to use what I'm going to share with you here today. And if you do have balls, then the creativity and creative thinking that I'm going to help supply to you here, or at least plant some seeds of here, you can go take that and your balls and maybe go make something happen. So let's get into it. Topic once again, the hidden opportunities in business. Point number one, target the unusual suspects. Not the usual suspects, the unusual suspects. What does that mean when I say target the unusual suspects in business? Tim Ferriss, for example, he's the author of a 4-hour series of books that made him famous. He talked about how when he was doing research for his books and he wanted to talk to someone who really knew a topic really well, he realized very quickly that if he tried to reach like whoever the most famous, in-demand person in that particular space at that time was, if he tried to reach them, it'd be very hard to reach them because they're very in demand. Everybody's calling them, everybody's reaching out to them, and it's hard to get a conversation with them. It's hard to get their time because everybody's reaching out, because this person is, everything's popping off for them at that moment. So what Tim decided to do, he said, how about I go find a person who has been on that level, but right now they're not the main person in the spotlight. So maybe they were the main person a few years ago or a decade ago. They're still alive, and it's not like they aren't smart anymore. They still have all their knowledge. They're just not as in demand now as they were because they're not on the scene right now. And that person was a lot easier to reach, and he could still get access to all the knowledge that he needed, and it was much easier to do so. So for example, when he did his 4-hour body, he told the story of like he wanted to talk to someone who had worked with like the highest level of athlete, the highest level performer. So he looked for people who had coached Olympic athletes, because to compete in the Olympics, It takes a lot. People put their whole lives into getting a chance to compete in the Olympics, let alone to win. So he thought about reaching out to current coaches of the Olympic team, but he knew they would be very, very in demand because they're working with their athletes and trying to help them get ready for the Olympics. So he decided, hey, how about I reach out to a guy who was coaching Olympic athletes 3 or 4 Olympiad ago, and the Olympics is every 4 years. So how about a guy who was coaching the Olympic team 3 or 4, not 4 years ago, but 4 different Olympics ago, which might be 16 years ago or 8 years ago or 12 years ago. Let me reach out to that guy. I mean, he still has all the knowledge, but he doesn't have a whole bunch of people calling him because he's not the guy right now. That's an example of what I'm talking about here. So these people are not being chased by everybody, but they still have the knowledge and they are very available and they're very easy to reach. Dan Kennedy, who's a marketing guy, he talks about this when it comes to infomercials. You ever turn to QVC at a home shopping network and you see some infomercial and you see some famous person who you know of, but you might have forgot of because they're not on the scene right now, like maybe a retired athlete or a little bit past their prime actor, or maybe a former politician, not always, but it could be something like that. He says a lot of times companies, when they're looking for an endorsee to help sell their product, they'll go find that person who's, again, a little bit past their prime. They're not the main person on the scene anymore, but their name still rings a bell and they can still move product by using that person's name. They'll go find them because it's much easier to reach them, number one. You can hire them for a lot less money, number two, and you can still get return on investment from your investment, number three. So this would be like, I mentioned a few days ago, the George Foreman grill. When the George Foreman grill came out, and the company reached out to George Foreman to have him as the endorsee. George Foreman at the time was not the hottest guy in boxing. He was past his prime as a boxer. I'm not sure he was still boxing. By that point, I don't think he was boxing anymore. He had become kind of this wholesome, everyday guy. And the Foreman grill was part of the thing that helped him do that. So they were able to get him. They didn't have to put as much money up front to get him, but he was still available and his name still rang a bell. So this is one of those hidden opportunities in business. Find somebody who's a little bit off the beaten path, but still has the pieces, let's just say, or the credibility that could help you. So again, they're not being chased, but they're available, they're easy to reach. So this requires you, here's the requirement for you. You got to do some digging and you got to do some research to find these people. Because again, they're not the it person right now. So you got to do some research to figure out who are these people? Where is this person? How do I reach them? They're not always as easy to spot. And again, they're not on the scene right now. So you have to do some work to identify them, and then you got to do some work to get in touch with them. Now, most of you listening to me right now, you like this idea. Logically, it makes sense to you, right? Most people ain't going to do anything with this. And this is why most people don't see these opportunities. It's not that the opportunity is not there. It's just that you don't see it because you're not doing the work to prepare for it. The unusual suspects do not have to be people, by the way. Unusual suspect can be information. Unusual suspect can be a process. It can be a formula. Most people usually look at material that is relatively new or relatively popular. For example, when you go on YouTube, for example, what kind of videos are you looking at? You're usually looking at the stuff that is relatively new or something that has a whole lot of engagement, a whole lot of views, because that's what everybody else is looking at. But the best information that you need, and I'm talking to everybody here, the best information you need is probably the older information that's probably not even that popular. Something that came out 5 years ago is not that popular. There's not a whole bunch of people looking at it. It didn't go viral, but in that material is exactly what you need right now. It's not the most popular thing that you need. It's the thing that is off the beaten path that you need. It's usually material that's been overlooked by most people, yet it has exactly what you would need to move yourself forward if you found out about it and consumed it. This is why you have to become a student of your area of study and expertise so that you know what to look for. See, if you're just browsing, you're going to just do the same thing that everybody else does. You'll default to looking at what everybody else is looking at. But when you're a student of the game, you know how to find the hidden gems. And the hidden gems are the ones that usually have the highest opportunity. Any of you who does any type of financial investing, you know that the best investment opportunities are not the ones that everybody is running to. It's not going and buying stock in Apple is like going to make you rich tomorrow. Not that Apple's value won't go up over time. But the point is, the best investment might be a company that very few people are talking about. Nobody's really looking at. They may not even be doing that great right now, but you find that diamond in the rough, and then 10 years from now, that company is blown up. And because you identified them when everybody else was looking at the most popular thing back then, you're the one who gets to win. So that's what I mean when I say an unusual suspect. You want to find that diamond in the rough. I'm recording this around this time is the NBA Finals. Miami Heat playing against the Denver Nuggets. Finals will be over by the time you hear this. But the Miami Heat is a team that has been lauded this year because they keep unearthing these undrafted players. These are players who were not selected in the NBA draft but are good enough to play in the NBA, and they become high-level contributors to a team that is competing for a championship. Why? Because Miami's organization has become very good at uncovering these unusual suspects, these diamonds in the rough. Everybody knows that the player who's the number 1 or number 3 pick in the NBA draft probably has a good chance of becoming great. But what about the player who nobody drafted, nobody picked up? Can you identify which one of those guys are going to be great? Because not all of them are going to be great. Some of them didn't get picked for a reason. But there are others who didn't get picked, but they actually are very good if they get the right training and the right grooming and the right organization to be a part of. The Miami Heat have become very good at that. That's an example of the unusual suspects. Often the most popular thing or most popular person is not the best quality thing or the best person that you need. Did everybody catch that? The most popular thing is often not the thing you need. It's not saying that the popular thing is not good, but is it exactly what you need? Probably not. So you got to look deeper and further than other people look in order to find those gems, to find those unusual suspects. And again, this is the discipline that most people don't have, and is the reason why most people can't get ahead. I heard sports writer Bill Simmons, who has a company called The Ringer, that they sold their company to Spotify, but he still works there. He mostly does podcasts now, but his background's in journalism as a columnist. And Bill talked about, because he has several companies where he hires writers, and he basically grooms and trains writers to become better writers in their own right. And I've heard him say this more than once when he was talking to people who he had hired, because he would have them as guests on his podcast, for example. And he would say how he would tell them that when you write your columns or you do a feature story, don't call 2 or 3 sources for every article that you write. Instead, call 10 or 15 sources. And what's the point here? It's the extra work that most people don't do that separates you from everybody else very easily, as long as you're willing to do the work. The challenge is many people are simply unwilling to do the work. People are just lazy. Moving on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is the hidden opportunities in business. Number 2, look for the back doors. Finding the back doors in business. I did a whole episode on this recently on the back doors in business. If you didn't hear that one, it was episode number 2587, how to get in the back door, just a couple weeks ago. If you train yourself to look for the back doors in every opportunity, you will find yourself having a lot more opportunity than the average person has. Why? Because you are simply looking for opportunity that other people do not see. The only person who can always get in the front door is a person who either has a lot of resources or they are very well known and already very well connected. And the thing is, these people usually don't need to go looking for business opportunities, because the opportunities are usually coming to them, all right, because they're so well known and so well connected. But if you're not well known and you're not well connected, you should be looking for back doors as a regular habit. It shouldn't even be a once in a while thing. It should be an everyday thing. You looking for the back doors. Why? Because the simple question you should train yourself to ask is, what's another way I can make this happen? Because you may not be able to make it happen the straightforward, normal, quote unquote, way. Because if you can make it happen the straightforward, normal way, if everybody could, well, then there'd be no need for me to even talk about what I'm talking about here today. Ask yourself, what is an alternative route to achieving your desired outcome? The thing you're trying to achieve right now, if I can't do it the normal, straight line way, what's another way I could do it? This is where your creative thinking side comes in, if you have one. And your habit of coming up with ideas will serve you well if you have cultivated the habit of coming up with ideas. All right, this is why I write down 10 ideas every single day. Not because I'm going to use most of them, but because I need to be ready to come up with creative ideas if and when I need them. I'm building the muscle ahead of time. So this is any of you have heard the saying, dig the well before you're thirsty. That's what this is about. Continually work on your mind and condition it to come up with ideas, even if you come up with 10 bad, terrible ideas every day. Just come up with 10 ideas. Why? Because the more you come up with ideas, the better your brain is conditioned to come up with ideas. So when you really need an idea, your brain can actually snap to action and actually give you one, instead of leaving you hanging and trying to figure out what to do. So this is building the muscle ahead of time. And the question again, for this back door, what's another way to make this happen? What's an alternative route to get into my outcome? Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how to identify the hidden opportunities in business. Number 3, the riches are in the niches. The riches are in the niches. Definition of a niche is a specialized segment of the market for a particular kind of product or service. So a niche can be, for example, when you have sneakers. I used to work at Foot Locker. My first job out of college, I was working at Foot Locker. And we had sneakers for men, we had sneakers for women, we had sneakers for kids. Each one of those is a niche. Kids sneakers is a niche, is a special kind of product, specialized segment of the market for a particular kind of product or service. So we had sneakers in Foot Locker, but we had a section of the store that was just for kids sneakers. That is a niche. So what is your niche in your business? It's easier to create an opportunity when you get very specific and detailed with what you want than it is when you are trying to go wide and broad. The more specific and detailed you are is much easier to create opportunity than when you're wide and broad, simply because you know exactly what you want. You see the episode where I talked about inches and miles, which I believe was episode 1154, but let me make sense. Let me make sure, rather. Inches and miles, episode 1254, not 1154. Episode 1254 is about inches and miles. It's easier to make something happen when you go 1 inch wide and 1 mile deep, rather than when you go a mile wide and 1 inch deep. See, it's not that things can't happen the other way, but it's much harder to make things happen when you are doing things that way. When you're doing things by going very wide, casting a wide net and hoping to catch something, it's much harder to do things than if you go deep and get very, very specific, because you know exactly who you're talking to. Even if fewer people come around, the few who you do talk to, you are perfectly calibrated for it, and you're much more likely to get the outcome that you want. Another reason why you want to go deep with people is if you don't go deep enough to separate yourself from the competition, then everything's going to continue to be competition. Everything and everyone will be competition. And the deeper you go in your profession, the less competition you will have. The deeper you go as far as inches deep and stay very narrow, as far as miles deep, and stay very narrow with only inches in width, the less competition you will have, simply because you're doing work that other people don't do. You're going deeper than most people go. It's easier to get an answer to a question where you are specific as to what you want than when you are broad and too general and unclear about what you want. When you are clear about what you want, it's much easier to get it. Can everybody agree? Getting specific requires that you have a deep understanding of what you're looking for, why you want it, rather than the surface level thoughts that lead to generalized chaos and generalized communication. So get as specific as possible about what you want, what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, how you're going to do it, instead of just swimming in these surface level thoughts that only lead to generalizations that usually don't really produce high quality results, and at least not nothing that's sustainable or of any real value. With all that said, let's recap today's class, which is the hidden opportunities in business. What I'm going to share today is about how you can find the loopholes and opportunities for making things happen in your business that are not traditional paths of making things happen. Point number 1, target the unusual suspects. Tim Ferriss talked about this, finding the people for his book interviews who were the person for a time in their space, but they're not the person anymore. So they're much easier to reach, much more accessible, and probably much more open to talking, simply because they don't have everybody calling them anymore like they used to. So look for the material that's been overlooked by most people, but is exactly what you need. This is what you need to be looking for when it comes to any type of research that you're doing. Look deeper than what is just on the surface. A lot of people only look at the surface because that's what's popular and that's what's convenient, but the thing that you need is probably something that goes a lot deeper than the surface. Heard sports writer Bill Simmons talked about how he would tell new columnists, new writers, that instead of interviewing 2 or 3 people for a story, interview 10 to 15 sources. Your writing will be a whole lot better. And he was also conditioning them to do extra work that most journalists do not do. Number 2, look for the backdoors. As long as you are, let me back up. Did a whole episode on the backdoors. If you train yourself to look for them, then you'll start noticing them another way. So the question you ask yourself is, what's another way I can make this happen? And what's an alternative route for achieving this outcome? Start asking those questions. Your creative juices will start flowing. Your habit of coming up with ideas will serve you. And you'll have that muscle ready just in case and if and when you need it. Number 3, the riches are in the niches. The deeper you can go into something as a niche, a specialized segment of the market for a particular kind of product or service, the easier it will be for you to share with them what it is that you do have, and get the feedback that you need to move forward, make your adjustments, or do more of what you're already doing. Understand that it's easier to get an answer to a question when you are specific in your ask than when you're on a board of governors and you're unclear as to what your, did I say board of governors? Too broad in general. I don't know what I'm looking at. My eyeball did a backflip there. It's easy to get an answer to a question when you are specific as to what you want than when you are too broad, too general, and unclear as to what you're asking for. So getting specific requires a deep understanding of what you're looking for and why you want it, rather than surface level thoughts that lead to generalized ideas and communication. All that said, text me. Let me know the best idea you got from today's class. My number is 305-384-6894, and WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. That's where you can get to work with me directly. You want to make more money in your business. You want to get your business actually taking off. You want to make more sales. You want to raise your prices. You want to get your personal life, professional lives both aligned and on the same page and everything working the way it's supposed to. You want to work on your mindset, your strategies, have the right strategy for what you're doing in your business. You want to systematize what you're doing so you can stop doing everything just by hard work and talent. And you want to make sure you're being held accountable to execute. All of those things and more happen inside of the university. Go to WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.